Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Christensen, and this is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, a gathering place for fellow fiends the world over to discuss all things freaky and frightening. If you want to be part of the conversation, and I hope you do, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, maybe go back, check out some of our previous episodes, leave a comment, and most importantly, let us know the fright flicks you'd like to discuss in the future. That kind of connection is exactly what we're looking for, and it really does make a difference. We're all about sharing the scare, and we want to hear from you. One of the best sci-fi horror efforts of the 1950s and must-see material for any card-carrying genre fan, Creature from the Black Lagoon was the brainchild of producer William Alland, who blatantly riffed on King Kong's storyline of a legendary beast sought out by civilized man for selfish designs. Screenwriters Harry Essex and Arthur Ross worked alongside legendary genre director Jack Arnold to create an on-screen antagonist so fantastic that audiences could not help but empathize. The story follows a team of scientists led by Richard Carlson, Richard Denning, and Julia Adams, who head into the wilds of South America in search of a mythical living fossil, a scaly humanoid amphibian that could serve as a missing link between land and sea creatures, leading to a fierce battle of wits and sheer animal instinct that will leave the Amazonian waters red with blood. The famous aquatic ballet between Julia Adams' character Kay and the love-struck Gillman remains one of the most iconic sequences in horror history. Credit to Scotty Wellborn and James C. Havens for their excellent underwater photography, made all the more challenging for being shot in 3D. I'm very excited to chat about the last of Universal's classic movie monsters, and I've assembled an amazing panel of classic movie monster fans to chat about it with me. So let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Bobby Sierre of Lugosi Theater.
Ba-ba-bum! Hi, guys.
Lee Price.
Really happy to be here.
Filmmaker and awesome blood brother here in Chicago, Dan Kiggins.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and we are here to chat about Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954, celebrating its 70th anniversary, and we will also chat about the sequels, Revenge of the Creature from 1955, and The Creature Walks Among Us from 1956. Thanks for coming on the show, everybody, and welcome.
Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here too. This is one of my favorite monster movies, favorite monsters period, just because it's such an amazing, iconic image. And unlike, say, Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the monster was always a monster and you couldn't tell who was playing it. You know, it's just the monster. It's not like Karloff as Frankenstein or Lugosi as Dracula. It is the Gillman. Dan, you've got some excellent finery behind you. I want to just tell, what was the first time you saw The Creature from the Black Lagoon? Do you have a memory?
I was fortunate enough to, in the 80s, the first time Slurpees came out for 7-Eleven, Svengoolie here in town, our local horror host, they had a gimmick where he played they played the second one, Revenge of the Creature. So I have a vivid memory of being about 8 years old. So it would have been about 83. And my entire family gathered around the television, all with our Slurpee glasses. So it's like a very vivid, warm memory. And I think that was like the kicking off point of my love for horror films.
Those were 3D glasses, right? They showed it in 3D.
Yeah. And I saw the other one on Svengoolie shortly after that, but like that, my first intro was Revenge with some Slurpee glasses. Yeah.
That's awesome. Lee, how about you?
Well, I'm here representing the boomer generation, so I'm going back further than Dan. I don't know when the first time I saw The Creature was. I was trying to go back in my mind. I know in 1969, when I was 9, I was down in Florida and I bought my first Famous Monsters of Filmland there. That's when I discovered the magazine. And I know when I bought that, I already knew all about The Creature and Revenge of the Creature. So it's going back into my own prehistory.
Back in the Devonian age.
The Devonian period, yeah. But it's just The Creature has just been a part of my life ever since then, and always associated with Florida, always deeply associated with Florida.
And Bobby, how about you?
Well, now we're jumping back to the 90s. I discovered it because every other weekend my mom would take me to the local video rental store, and they didn't categorize them alphabetically. It was done by like genre and subgenre. So they had a whole section of Universal monster movies with all the sequels. So like every other weekend, like I was devouring them one after another. I was about seven going to 8, and that's when I first watched them, and I just like immediately loved them. You know, we had a swimming pool in the back. My dad had a boat, so like I love the idea of the water monster.
That's awesome. Yeah, and same thing. I think I'm like smack in the middle of Lee and Dan, because I was born in '68. You know, right alongside Rosemary's Baby, Night of the Living Dead, and Witchfinder General. I remember going to my public library after I discovered, you know, Godzilla and King Kong, and looking for books on monster movies, and they had the whole Crestwood series of classic monsters, and there was Creature from the Black Lagoon in so many of these reference books. And I just remember being transfixed, because again, he didn't look like a human. He didn't look like, you know, a guy wearing makeup. He looked like the creature from the Black Lagoon. And when I did finally get to see it on Late Night Creature Features, I just think that first film is such a solid piece of movie making. You know, it's a really lean, efficient story, well told, well acted, really well directed by Jack Arnold. I think it's a great film, and I think it really holds up well. We're going to talk a little bit about the origins. Producer William Alland apparently was having dinner with Orson Welles, and cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa related the story of a half man, half fish. And from that, William Alland said, hey, let's go back to the King Kong playbook, and we'll take an expedition into the wild, and we'll come back with a monster. It's funny to watch it now, but I think it still succeeds really well as its own beast. Bobby, tell us a little bit about what are some of the things you like about that first movie, Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954?
First, I love everything about it. I love how it grabs you right away with the asteroid blowing up. I just love how the suspense continues to build throughout the whole thing. First you're going in the Amazon, then the first attack, you don't see him. It's just like the effects. Then you see him underwater. Then you see him above water, but he's not. Then you see him above water, but not full strength. So it's like you're constantly excited for what's going to happen next.
Lee?
This is a little technical, but I love the second unit work in it. It's just whenever they go underwater, it's the second unit. It's a little team of the main cinematographer Scotty Welburn and Rico Browning and everybody who had to be underwater with them to support all these 3D cameras down there. And the work that they did, it's some of the best underwater cinematography you're going to see in anywhere, because usually when they go underwater, it all slows down. People are moving slowly. Even if they're trying to swim fast, it still is moving slowly. But they really keep the action going there. And I think it's largely due to just Rico Browning's performance. It's incredible because he doesn't swim like a person.
No.
He swims like a very unique creature. It's wonderful. It's with me, it's up there with the Fred Astaire dancing or Charlie Chaplin pantomime. He's acting in water with a heavy suit on, can barely see anything. All this weight on him, going down into real depths in the water.
Yeah.
And he's still keeping up the performance. Just amazing work.
Esther Williams, eat your heart out.
Yeah, right? Right? Actually, now I have to ask, did Esther Williams ever do a skit or anything with the Creature from the Black Lagoon? That just seems like what a natural fit that would have been.
Not that I know of.
Okay, well, I'm just going to CGI that in my head someday. And how about you, Dan?
Well, the first one is honestly, it's a marvel of filmmaking. I mean, for them to basically create these cameras to do that. Previously, they were using stills or cameras in glass boxes that they would just put under. And this is a vast jump beyond that. And my favorite gimmick is 3D, and it's done so well. And that's only one level of it. I mean, the makeup of it and the story is great, and like it's just a marvel. And I feel like it was Universal kind of trying to make themselves a little bit modern for the time, 1954. Now you've got like cars and people and more modern music and whatnot, where everything else was from the past, at least, you know, like The Invisible Man or Family Opera. It has a little bit more of that modern feel they're going for, and they do it with the gimmick, and it all paid off so well.
If you think about, you know, like the other classic Universal monsters, they were back in the early to mid 30s. So we're already talking 20 years ago. When you talk about a modern monster, I think that's absolutely accurate. I want to go back to what you were saying, Lee, that idea of Riku Brownie's performance. Every time I watch this movie, I just marvel at, yes, we know it's a man in a suit, but it doesn't feel like a guy wearing a costume. It feels like a true creation. It's a perfect synthesis of performance and makeup and direction. And I'm really knocked out by that. Like you said about Riku Browning's performance, he's giving a performance underwater, which is incredible. We should also talk about Ben Chapman, who is the other actor responsible for bringing the creature to life on land.
When we hit Revenge of the Creature, I'm actually going to be singing praise for Tom Hennessy, because actually this is where I do think Jack Arnold screwed up a little bit with this, because he had Ben Chapman moving like the Frankenstein monster. He's moving or like the Mummy, maybe he's moving slowly.
Great.
And it seems like it with Revenge of the Creature, Jack Arnold realized that it works well when the creature jumps up or like that, when there's a sudden movement from the creature. So it's much more lively then. So I like Ben Chapman's a lot, but that's one area where I think it's actually improved in the second movie.
I agree. I feel like they handle it well, because it's like, I like how you first see him underwater, and I think that helps a lot. That first we're getting exposed by Rico Browning, who's so convincing as a half man, half fish. And then you're slowly introduced to the above water creature. First you just see him kind of walking like his feet. So it gives you time to suspend your disbelief.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
It's like going from a slow zombie to a fast zombie when you go from one movie to the next.
I agree. What I like about the slow moving land version of Creature is that it does set him up as a creature of the water. And when he's on land, he's literally out of his element and having to kind of, lumber his way along. There was something I actually really liked about Godzilla -1, was that we saw a creature that was much more at home in the water. And once he got on land, it was like, oh my God, I have to walk now. I'm not used to walking. So I didn't mind that. I do agree though, Lee, that's actually a really good point about, having a more dynamic creature just makes for a more dynamic antagonist. But I don't mind the slowness of it, because as you said, Bobby, like we don't know what this creature is. We don't know what this creature does, so we don't have any expectations of it yet.
Oh my God, I love the shot of him like walking towards the camera with the gills going.
Oh,
yep. Yep. And I like the noises that he makes, and it's clear that he's not built to be on land. He's not meant to be breathing air. He's like gasping and like, okay, I can get through this, but I'm much more at home breathing through the gills.
Is this the point where we should give some credit to Millicent Patrick?
I don't think there's any wrong time to give credit.
She went so many decades without the credit for designing, for the artistic design, the concept of what the creature was going to look like. You just did amazing work.
Bud Westmore was the head of Universal's makeup, and it's his credit that we see on screen. There was very much a concentrated effort to kind of keep Millicent Patrick in the background, although she went on tour, if I'm not mistaken. Like she toured around during the early.
She was well publicized at the time, much to the chagrin of Bud Westmore, and actually he went to the higher ups and was demanding that she pare it back quite a bit, and saying that he'd never work with her ever again. And if you look at it, she only has one more credit with makeup from there on in. There's some acting credits beyond that, but he pretty much ended her career. But at the time, she was recognized because she was an ex-countess, and she was just such an interesting person that the press just loved her. And it was Bud Westmore that was not happy. I mean, there's a number of people that got glossed over from Bud Westmore. Supposedly, he had a thing where if he came in and told you to go to lunch, that meant that the press was coming. And it got word around that if he told you to leave, to stick around and at least you get your picture in the paper. And like Bud is standing next to the thing holding a tool that he'd never touched before in his life. She is definitely getting known now, but she did get recognized at the time, but she should get her credit for sure.
I just want to give a little shout out to Tom Weaver, one of the best ever, interviewed virtually everybody from the Creature movies involved with them. And then after that, following up his work, Mallory O'Meara's book on The Lady and the Creature from the Black Lagoon on Melissa Patrick is wonderful. It is such a fun read, and it is so great that between the two of them, Weaver and Mallory O'Meara, they really got Millicent Patrick the attention that she deserved.
Couldn't agree more. I'm glad you mentioned that. Creature, a lady from the. Is it Lady from the Black Lagoon?
Yeah, The Lady from the Black Lagoon.
I was going to say, even as late as like that videotape I was talking about, like the 1999 videotape, it didn't mention Millicent Patrick at all. It was just Bud Westmore.
And, you know, the other person who doesn't get mentioned very often is Jack Keevan. And he helped design the body part of the suit. You know, so we have those awesome kind of ribbed scales that go all the way down the body. And that's something I was really struck by. I mean, yes, the design of the head is iconic, but if you look at, like, you had to design a costume that an actor could swim in, could move with, and that it didn't look like I'm wearing this rubbery suit. So, like, you know, you don't want to see it buckling at the joints and things like that. And you never, I mean, you know where the zipper is, but you don't see the zipper. And I love that about that design. I don't mind knowing how the trick is done as long as it's a really good trick.
I think that's why it's so easy to just do it. Like, believe the creature. Like, you believe he's a real creature, you forget he's an actor.
Jack Arnold had directed It Came from Outer Space the year before. 1954, he did this film. And then 1955, he did Tarantula and the sequel to Creature from the Black Lagoon, Revenge of the Creature. So he was kind of like just becoming, and then he went on to do Incredible Shrinking Man, 1957, which is probably my favorite Jack Arnold film that he ever directed. Riku Browning, Dan, you said you did get to meet him at a show once, yeah?
I did get to meet him. I talked to him for a lengthy period of time. Like, it was neat to learn that it was by chance that he was cast to begin with, because when they were looking at the property in Florida, the owner of the property couldn't be there. He was called away. So Rico picked up Jack and the producer from the airport and showed them the area, and they did camera tests, and they asked if he would swim in the camera tests. And he gets a call a month later after they live and said, "Hey, we like you. We like the way you swim. Would you want to be the Creature from the Black Lagoon?" And he was in right away. But like, I mean, the ups, things are dropping. I learned a lot of things from him. I mean, I luckily, like, I caught him in a lull in his line or whatever, but I got to talk to him about a certain amount of things, including the scene where he swims under them and his own take on that. And he was just an interesting, amazing gentleman, even without the Creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, he did Thunderball, all that underwater stuff he was responsible for all that. He created Flipper. He did all this other stuff. So he was basically the king of Hollywood for underwater stuff, and just a brilliant, really nice gentleman. Another strange thing was I found out that Glenn Strange, the Frankenstein fame, was going to be the Creature from the Black Lagoon, but they said, "You're going to have to swim a whole lot." And he goes, "I can't swim. I'm not going to swim all the time. I'm passing on this role." And then to find out later, he's like, "Oh, they would have had the other guy swim. I would have done it." You know what I mean? But I'm glad that he gave Ben Chapman his chance to shine.
Lee, I know you met Mr. Browning as well, correct?
I was just awestruck with, couldn't think of anything to say except, man, I loved your work.
And Bobby, you and I were talking backstage, like you were planning to meet him back in 2020.
He was going to be at Days of the Dead Chicago. I couldn't wait, and then the COVID pandemic started. So then everything got canceled, and I was able to get his autograph through a thing where you ordered online, but then he sadly passed away.
Right. But that's what I've heard from everybody who has met him, was just what a generous human being he was. And, he did swim in all 3 of the creature movies. He doesn't do as much in the final movie. He was also very helpful in terms of the underwater crew, like teaching people how to breathe from the hose. All those folks who had to be underwater, they hadn't done that before. And so Rico Browning ended up kind of being a technical advisor in that regard.
After he passed away, I made a TikTok video about his passing. And I was so proud of the response. There were so many comments, like I think like over 100 saying how much everyone loved the creature.
I mentioned before about Florida and how I associate the creature with Florida. My parents would regularly take us on vacations down to Florida when I was growing up. And this was pre-Disney World, Florida, where a time when Florida was weird. Florida has always been weird, but it was just weird in a different way. Without Disney, you had all these other places, and one place, there was Silver Springs, where they filmed part of Revenge of the Creature. We went to Marineland, and where a large part of Revenge of the Creature takes place. And then there was Weeki Wachee, and we always went to Weeki Wachee, and Weeki Wachee was where Rico Browning really started his professional career. It's where the mermaids would swim underwater, and it was a theater with a big glass wall, so you're looking right out into a Florida swamp, with the women who were hired by the theatrical producer there were swimming in the water. And Rico Browning was hired to help out in any way that he could, because he was such a champion swimmer and such an agreeable person. He ended up teaching the mermaids how to swim underwater and how to use the hose. So he became a master at using the hose through that. And he frequently performed at Weeki Wachee in the years before the first Creature movie. But that's where he learned the hose breathing. And the hose breathing really was invented, I believe, for Weeki Wachee. That was a sort of a new idea to how to do this. But it's very difficult, where they're holding their breath for a long period of time, 1 or 2 minutes. And he's down there. He and Ginger Stanley did a lot of this stuff. She was the body double for both. She did the stunt work for both Julie Adams and Laurie Nelson in the Revenge of the Creature movie. And they would be underwater with the person holding the hose just out of range of the giant 3D camera. And every now and then you can sort of, once you know they're doing it, you can sort of see where they swim out of range for a minute, and then they come right back in and continue the scene. So just, I really associate Rico Browning and the whole thing with the whole Weeki Wachee scene. And it actually makes it more special for me in a way.
We've barely talked about the movie itself. The idea of hitting those kind of King Kong talking points. We've got a group of scientists that are venturing into the Amazon to, see if they can discover. First, they're looking for the fossils of this missing link, but then they realize there might actually be a living, creature still around. And so we have Richard Denning as the kind of money-minded guy who wants to capture the creature and bring him back to civilization and display him, dead or alive. And they have Richard Carlson, who's kind of the more intellectual, more kind of in tune with nature scientist, and Julie Adams do we think Julie Adams is a doctor as well? Is she on the same level as the others?
Her scientific dialogue is more intelligent than the guys.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't see her as a subordinate.
Right. She seems like an equal.
There's
Yeah.
one line in there where it said that that Mark, the Richard Denning character, basically wouldn't be where he was without her.
Without her research, yeah.
Without her research.
Yeah, I feel like they're trying to bring her to the forefront, but also she's still kind of relegated to that, female sci-fi. Yes, look pretty, but don't take up too much space.
If she is a scientist, she's the least paid scientist in the room.
For sure. And would continue to be.
I have to say that really makes her stand out a lot of among the other Universal monster heroines, though. Because you could tell even like how when she's driving the boat, like you can never imagine Helen Chandler as mean in doing that.
Right. True. And of course, we should just talk right now about that iconic swimming sequence where she's in that white bathing suit and swimming on top of the water, and the creatures underneath her. Does anybody want to talk about that?
People always reference it's the sexuality of the swimming and them coming together and him mirroring her. But when I talked to Riku specifically about that, I said, was there anything in the script? Did Jack Arnold say anything about how to do this at all? And he goes, not at all. He said the reason he's swimming the way he's swimming is he's 2 inches back in the costume and he can barely see her. So he's struggling his best just to keep up and do his own thing. So as many film majors that have drummed that up to be whatever, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. They mirror it in the second film though too, but as a pair, and he almost does the exact same look in the way he's swimming, but no one mentions that one at all because that would have been a threesome. You know what I mean?
Any thoughts on our human characters? Richard Carlson, Richard Denning, and Julie Adams. We also have Whit Bissell as our other scientist who gets mauled. Whit Bissell, who would show up in a bunch of these, he's kind of like a William Shallert type of character actor. I know him from I Was a Teenage Werewolf and I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. Those are the ones that I recognize him the most from. Yeah. Apparently, Richard Carlson was not the nicest guy in real life, and he plays the good guy. And Richard Denning apparently was just such a sweetheart, and he's always like the mean guy.
Supposedly, Richard Carlson, he wanted to be the most important person in the room, and he had directed other features and stuff like that. So he felt like he was up here when everyone was here. So he felt anyone who talked to him with any authority, he would tell them how to do their job. So that doesn't sound like a really pleasant person to work with. But he was in many amazing sci-fi films. My favorite being Valley of Guanji, and his name was Chuck Connors.
Actually, can I talk about Nestor Pavia as Lucas?
I would love to, yes. Oh my gosh, yes, Nestor Pavia. Thank you.
I love him. He's so funny. He brings so much life to the movie. I love when he's like, and don't forget our catfish. They grow to be 9 feet long. Killers, all killers. Like he's such a cool character. And when he's like when they're all doing like all the research on land, he's just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, when he's pulls out a knife, like he doesn't care. He's that rough,
Yeah, I love that. He's funny, lovable, but still edgy.
Yeah, no, he's clearly somebody who's literally the captain of his own ship, and he's like, I'm in charge here. You would not be here, and I decide when we leave. I decide when we stay.
The creature from the Black Lagoon, it reminds me of the Jaws of its day. He's like the Quint.
That's for sure.
I love Whit Bissell. I like him a lot more in a role like this than in the teenage movies. I don't like him when he's a more unpleasant character. I like him as the kindly pipe smoking scientist, and he's just the best when he's in scientist mode. He's up there. My two favorite scientists from the 50s are Whit Bissell and over at Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Cecil Kellaway. Those are my two favorites. Those are what I want scientists to be.
Because I watched all the Universal monster movies back to back when I was introduced to them. So this was such a different experience, like seeing them from wearing, tuxedos and suits and jackets to being in their underwear, or their swimsuits. It made them feel like they felt so much more like relatable to me.
Well, and again, kind of going back to Dan's point, like this feels like such a different film. Let's talk about Revenge of the Creature, which is very much kind of the other half of King Kong, where we bring the monster into civilization and the monster gets to wreak havoc. Dan, you talked about how you saw it for the first time. How does it hold up for you watching it now, like especially watching it and Creature back to back?
It's definitely taken a back seat to the first one because the first one is so excellent. It's the next step in that evolution. In the first one, we're invading their territory. And we've enslaved him and brought him here. And in the third one, it's almost like they've made him the most human of it all. So it's like an evolution through it all. And in this one, they're trying to condition him with shock therapy, which really doesn't work underwater. Electricity kind of conducts everywhere when you're doing that. It's an evolution of the character. So it's like now he's just trying to escape more than drive people out of his own thing. But it's still along the lines of an animal's an animal. You know what I mean? And I think they lose that in the third one with, I think, writing in general. I enjoy it. I mean, it's a little bit more action, a little bit less thought. But it's a good film. It is my second favorite of the three, but a far second from the first.
My nickname for this movie is The Creature Goes on Spring Break. Actually, when I was little, I liked this one more. The first one is definitely a better made film. It's more atmospheric, but this one's a lot of fun. Like, the creature's rampage is much more outrageous. How he tips over the car, how he invades the restaurant, how the Navy's after him. It's not as serious, but I think it's a really, really fun sequel.
With Eastwood.
Oh, it has Clint Eastwood. That's right.
I have deep nostalgia for Revenge of the Creature. I don't like it more than Creature from the Black Lagoon, but I deeply love it. It has Marineland in it. I have been to Marineland so many times. Yeah, I love King Kong. I love King Kong more than this. It's top 5 movie for me. But I've never been up in the Empire State Building. I've been to the Marineland a lot. I want to see the monster rampage in Marineland. That always was such an exciting idea for me. I do kind of wish that it followed. My dream Creature from the Black Lagoon would have been, instead of an hour and 20-minute movie, would have had the first one. The first one basically ends with Fay Ray being rescued from Kong's lair by Bruce Driscoll, and they're going down the rope, and they get back to everybody, and then they go home. And that would have been the end of Kong if it followed the Creature from the Black Lagoon narrative. What I would love to have done is just they added half an hour more, basically, of Revenge of the Creature to the rest of it, where they capture the creature right there. They keep the same cast, and you go to Marineland. He breaks out of Marineland and grabs Julie Adams. They're heading towards the ocean, and then they can gun them down, or they could get helicopters or planes or whatever to take care of the situation. But just half an hour more, and forget all the additional stuff of going down the river and all that. All I want to see is a rampage in Marineland, and then I have the perfect creature movie. I want the King Kong narrative.
That's right. Yep. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, if we'd had that King Kong narrative, it would have been too obvious. That, like, this is literally King Kong, guys. What are you doing? RKO's like, excuse me, can we have our check?
There is a part where the cameras are supposedly upsetting the creature, and that's what merely makes him freak out. I didn't know that until I heard the commentary, but I'm like, oh, that is very King Kong.
At first, I didn't notice it until I heard the commentary, because I don't think I ever watched him back to back like that until after that. Once you see it, you see it, but like before, I don't know if you necessarily notice it.
Sure.
Well, if you're following the King Kong narrative, you do have the Beauty and the Beast story, which does mean that when Julie Adams is swimming and the creature's below her, Yeah, there is supposed to be that. I do think that's supposed to be there. That was Rico Browning might not have been fully aware that was how it was going to be interpreted, but it's kind of baked into the whole concept.
Well, and Bobby and I talked about this when we did the King Kong episode, but it's one of those things where I think the creature isn't necessarily sexually attracted. He's never seen anything like it before. He doesn't know what to do with it. He just knows that he's curious about it, and he wants it. He wants to have it. You know, similar to Kong. Like, you know, Kong's not going to have relations with Ann Darrow, but he's like, I'm gonna keep this though because I like it. And I feel like the same thing holds true for our creature here, that he wants Kay for his own. And then of course we, you know, again, it gets a little bit more blatant King Kong because now we have a blonde in Revenge of the Creature. I'm like, yep, there we go. That was the missing piece. Let's get a blonde in there. There we go. John Agar is our male co-star, and John Agar, of course, would go on to do lots and lots of 50s sci-fi. He's the star of Tarantula. He's in The Mole People. I think he does a decent job here. I would say that I think Richard Denning and Richard Carlson are both maybe stronger actors, but Agar's definitely a likable presence.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, the characters in the first one were more developed, but these ones are like they're all likable. They all seem like they're all neat. They're all fun to watch. I really like the creature attacks. I feel like they give it like a much more like imaginative spin on it, like how they throws them at the tree and
yes.
So like from like that of just the monster on the rampage aspect, I think it does a really great job.
Well, that goes back to your point, Lee, about like this being a more energetic creature. And we definitely should give credit to Tom Hennessy, because I don't think he's somebody who gets mentioned often enough.
Supposedly there was a different swimming guy they hired to replace Riku named John Lamb. And I guess they shot some things with him, but he just didn't work out. So they replaced him with Riku. And supposedly that's why Riku's head doesn't fit very well. And you see bubbles coming out of the top of it, some because bubbles are getting trapped in there. It's not as A-type fit, but just so everyone knows how many people went through the entire thing to play. But supposedly John Lamb lost the part of the creature, but when the creature is being dragged into the aquarium in the net, it's John Lamb and Hennessy are the divers that are dragging him. So in that shot, there's 3 representations of the Gillman in one shot, which I think is very interesting.
That's fun.
I always kind of like the bubbles. I thought it made him more like a fish.
Huh?
I noticed it more this time, more than ever. But yeah, they were just coming straight out of the top of his head. Yeah.
Well, let's press on to our final film, which is The Creature Walks Among Us. Came out in 1956. Revenge of the Creature was definitely already kind of in the works when Creature from the Black Lagoon came out, because Universal realized that we can make money off of this. Ma and Pa Kettle and Francis the Talking Mule, those, like, Universal was into series. They like to kind of like keep things going. This is obviously, just in the early days of television, but Creature Walks Among Us is one of those kind of like, it's a definite ending to this trilogy. Like, it ends in a very, you can't go back, we can't have more adventures of Creature from the Black Lagoon because he's no longer the same creature.
The gill man has no gills. They burned off.
Yeah. It starts off with this, like one more time, they're going to try and find the gill man. They get him. And during a conflict on the boat, he dumps gasoline on himself and gets burned, and it burns off his outer layer of skin. And then they do like an operation where they take his gills out and enhance the lungs. But it really does. It's an interesting spin on an iconic monster. It'd be like if you made the werewolf into something else, or if, like they did at the end of House of Dracula, if you cured him. You're like, wait, you can't cure Lawrence Talbot. Like, you just killed our cash cow.
Unwrap the mummy.
Well, I mean, changing him to like more of a land creature, it does take away like some of what's like so like awesome and like I think neat about the creature. But it also I like how it's like it's a new turn for the character.
Yeah.
Like, because like the three, it's not the same as before. He's in a completely new situation. You feel the subtext of always feeling for the creature, I think, is brought more to the forefront. So he's much more the hero of the movie. Whereas I noticed all the human characters, they're not as likable. They're much more clearly the villain.
I think in Revenge of the Creature, like that monster we don't really feel for him. We don't have as much empathy for him as we did in the first one, and certainly not as much in this one. In this one, we literally are changing this creature into a human. He's wearing clothes. He's walking around on land. He's clearly gone to the gym quite a bit.
The linebacker now.
Like you, Bobby, I like where this story goes because it's not the same old. This is something completely different.
There's this apocryphal story about Jean Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast, where I think it was Greta Garbo watching it when the Beast changes into Prince Charming at the end. She's like, "Give me back my beast." And that's the way I feel from the moment he goes into the operating room. I just want my Gilman back. I have such feelings of deep dissatisfaction with the movie from that point. There are things like that I like a little. I can never get over that. I want the creature.
That's absolutely, some people might consider that a misfire on Universal's part, is to, completely de-gill their Gilman. I like the human conflict more. And I was reading Keep Watching the Skies, Bill Warren's terrific book about 50s sci-fi movies. And he talks about how this is a more adult film than the other two, in that it's dealing with adult themes and adult relationships. And it's interesting because, clearly this was made for the monster kids. Like, that's who these movies were made for. And so, like, the kids are just sitting there going, why do I have to listen to these adults have to deal with their fidelity issues and their insecurities? But as an adult, I was sitting there watching it going, when we're dealing with Jeff Morrow and his relationship with his wife, there's all this insecurity going on there. And he keeps accusing her of being a tramp and flirting with everybody. And that is not happening at all. And it's like, it would have been so easy to have a Yvette Vickers kind of like, oh, I'm dissatisfied in this relationship, I'm going to go mess around with this guy over here. But that's never happening. I'm like, what a nuanced approach to these adult relationships for kind of a B movie.
There are some things that I dislike about that whole melodrama approach. It feels very much like a Douglas Sirk Universal melodrama from that period. But there are several things that go on with that just don't work for me. One is the character of the Lee Snowden character itself, the woman, just feels like a devolution again. And we go from a woman who's holding her own with scientists in the first movie to a person who's studying for a master's degree and about working on her master's thesis in Revenge of the Creature. And then in the third one, we have a trophy wife who's, going to trade up on a husband, but at the end of the whole thing, oh man, I really like the professional women in the earlier ones, but where this leaves the creature is really disturbing to me because it sort of emasculates him. He becomes like the kindly, wise uncle in the background who's going to solve everybody's problems in the end and sacrifice himself so that there can be a happy ending. And that doesn't sound creaturely to me. He kind of he entirely loses his edge.
It always struck me the scene when she shoots at the shark, and her excuse is it was about to feed the porpoises. So, like that theme of like total disregard for like nature, and that we have the right to mess with it.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I felt was ingrained in all the human characters.
Yeah, they're not likable. Even Rex Reason with his amazing voice, he's the most likable of the scientists, but even he is kind of, not somebody I want to root for.
And it's that's such a unique departure, for the film series.
Yeah, I think what I like about it on this most recent is how different it is from almost any other 50s sci-fi movie. Yes, it has some flaws to it, but they did a big swing on this one. You know, like they really were trying for something different.
There are two things I really do like about it. One of them is where it's most like the other creature movies. The scene where they capture him is fantastic. The leap of the creature up into the boat, and then when he catches fire on the boat, it's a really great action scene that would be a highlight in either of the other two movies. There's nothing in the movie to equal that for me. That's the action highlight of it. The other thing is the last shot is beautiful and poetic.
Yeah.
I don't think it's earned, but but I wish it worked better for me. It's still moving. It's an interesting idea. I just don't think it's fully enough developed, and it's certainly the most poetic thing outside of the swim. Okay, the swim, Julie Adams,
yep.
That's top of the line where everything's working. But this was quite an idea to have the creature staring out into the water that he can't go into. We know he's intelligent enough to know that. There's every sign that he's a fairly intelligent species, but it's his home, and he's going to go,
even if it kills him. Like I think that's the idea I get, is that he's going to go into the water, and that's going to be where his story ends.
The scene where he catches on fire is kind of reminiscent of the first film, when they do the exact same thing, when they hit him with another lantern and he burst into flames there. What I didn't know from that was that they'd superimposed a flaming person over Ben Chapman in the original one, and I never knew that until now. But in that newest one, I agree with you, Lee. That scene's amazing. And that creature who jumps up is a stuntman named Al Wyatt, who only did that sequence right there. And they actually added flames on top of Flaming Wyatt for that one to make it even better. But to backtrack slightly, I think Lee Snowden was an interesting character for once. It did deviate from the kind of the two good girls, smarty people, but she's not the damsel in distress that Julie Adams is. She's badass enough to grab a gun and start blasting away at sharks or whatever. Now, the whole thing with Jeff Morrow's character, I think it helps that she did rebuff all these obvious attempts at her to woo her or whatever, but Jeff Morrow wouldn't let that go, and it kind of lets you dislike that character more, think that he doesn't know what's going on. So it makes him easy to dislike. But even at the end, it seems like the creature's the least interested in her, because at the end he has a chance he opens the door and she's standing there, and he decides just to go over and kill Jeff Morrow rather than grab her again or do whatever, and then walk off into the sunset. So I think he's had his fill of women at this point.
The other scene I thought was really powerful was when he first realizes that he can't survive on water, when he's like drowning in it. Like that scene really stuck out to me. This is like the one I've like watched the least in my life, and so like some of it I had forgotten, and I had forgotten that scene, and rewatching it for this video, it just like it blew me away.
I like the chances that it takes, and I like the fact that this female character is probably the most complex of any of them, because yes, she's a trophy wife, but she doesn't want to be a trophy wife. She wants to be seen as an equal, but she doesn't know how to be that equal. I just think there's a lot going on for, the third film in a B movie series. Your comparison to a Douglas Sirk melodrama. Well, I really like Douglas Sirk melodrama. It's like nobody did melodrama like Douglas Sirk. So if it even can approach that, I think well done.
Yeah, it's that car driving in the beginning where I think she's driving fast, and it's such a Douglas Sirk scene.
Any final thoughts on Creature from the Black Lagoon? Any other, trivia or personal experiences you want to share?
You know that iconic shot of Marilyn Monroe when her dress is blowing up in the air?
From 7 Year Itch?
From 7 Year Itch. That scene, her and her boyfriend are just coming back from seeing The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
That's right. That's right.
And I also love his guest appearance on The Munsters, where he plays Uncle Gilbert, because the episode's called Love Comes to Mockingbird Heights. So I love that, like, you know, romance was always part of the Creature from the Black Lagoon movies. So I love that it carries over to his Munsters appearance.
I have never seen that episode. I will have to seek that out.
It's cool. He just appears like a short cameo at the end, but it's a cool cameo.
One thing that I've been thinking about lately has been just trying to put this in historic context and see why they were making this particular movie at this particular time. And this is something I haven't read about anywhere else, but I do think it's kind of interesting that among the best-selling books, this was 1954 in The Creature from the Black Lagoon. In 1951, Rachel Carson published this Sea Around Us, which was a very big seller. That was the book she did before Silent Spring, which became a huge seller. But her first breakthrough book here was on the ocean. And then in 1953, probably even more interesting for the relationship to this movie, is that Jacques Cousteau published his first book, The Silent World, which is all about discovering the seas through scuba diving, which he had virtually invented. So that's 1953, the year before this. So there's a lot of interest in scuba diving. And you just, you combine that with Scotty Welburn in the Universal Studio inventing this camera, because he's building a new camera, a 3D camera that you can take underwater. It just seems like everything was coming together there to do, let's do something different. We'll do a 3D movie underwater, which is just getting to, they're all looking for gimmicks in the early 1950s, like the 3D gimmick, to the extent that it is a gimmick, CinemaScope, get the screen as wide as possible, get everything looking as little as like TV as possible. But they're also interested in exploring the oceans for the first time. So it's really sort of combining all those things together. And so 1954, you get The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Thank you, Lee. That was really great insight. Tell us, I know that you've written some essays on Creature of the Black Lagoon. Let us know where we can find those.
I did a bunch of essays back 10 years ago for my own blog, 21 Essays, but the whole blog has been dormant for a while and it's not in that good shape. So I'm rewriting them, bringing up to date with a lot of new material. I mean, in the years since I did them, a creature-inspired movie has won the Best Picture Oscar. So a lot has happened in the past 10 years. But I'm going to be publishing those 3 essays in early March on the Wonders in the Dark blog, and it's a nice home for them. So a much healthier blog than I ever had. So I like to rescue them and put them out for the public again.
Cool. We will have a link down in the video description where you can read Lee's writings on Creature from the Black Lagoon. And Lee, like, you apparently just got moved up into pole position. So, well done.
Little bits of trivia. In 1982, we almost got a third 3D version of Creature from the Black Lagoon. Executive produced by John Landis. Going to have Jack Arnold still as the director. Rick Baker was going to do the effects. Nigel Neal was going to be the writer. And Universal decided not to do it so they could back Jaws 3D. Which I think is just horrible. This movie just means a lot to me. I think it helps that I got to meet several of the people that worked with it. And actually, small thing, Riku Browning, he directed a film called The Incredible Mr. No Legs. And I came upon a copy of it, and I had someone give him a copy of it, and he did not have a copy of his own film, and his children had not seen his own film. So I gave the man his own film to show his own family. So that means something very special to me. And another special thing to me was when I met Julie Adams, I had her sign this finish poster that's above my head right here. and she said that she had never seen it and wanted to take a picture of it and put it in her book. So I don't know if it got in the book. So if you guys have Julie Adams' book, let me know if that finished poster got in there. But other than that, this movie is just a special thing to me, and I think it's special to a lot of people because it is so fantastic, and it holds up this long and is by far my favorite Universal monster, hands down.
Yes, happy 70th birthday, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Thank you all so much. This was such a great conversation. I so enjoyed watching these movies again, so thank you for the opportunity to do that. And thanks for chatting about them with me. We will see you all again on the show again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.